What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And in this video I'll be featuring battles in the Little Jungle Cup. For the team, I'm running Ducklett on the lead, Vigoroth on the safe swap, and Galarian Stunfisk in the back. Ducklett is such a dominant Pokemon in the Little Cup, where its bulk as well as having access to Brave Bird is absolutely devastating. Vigoroth on the safe swap fills that role in the Little Cup just as well as it does in the Great League, where it very often gets you shield advantage or switch, and Gfisk as the closer is dominant. Now as for the movesets, my Vigoroth is single moved as you basically only need Body Slam on it anyways, but if you want that second move, go with Brick Break so you can hit those steals for super effective damage. One word of advice with Brick Break, since it is such a poor move, the only situation where you'd want to throw Brick Break is against steel types, because even if you're up against another normal type, Body Slam still does more damage despite it being neutral, while Brick Break is super effective. And as for Gfisk, I'm running EQ as a second move since both Brave Bird and Vig have a great ability to grab shields. This paves the way to absolutely nuke your opponent. You could run Muddy Water instead, since Mons in the Little Cup are so glassy, as well as that ability to get to a charge move in only 4 mud shots. And actually, if you are running Gfisk on the lead or as a safe swap, Muddy Water will probably be your better option just because of that. But in its role that I have here, either could work, as I definitely have won some games due to having EQ, but I've also lost some for not having Muddy Water. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Ducklett into Drifloon. It's a pretty neutral matchup since they do have Icy Wind and Shadow Ball, but we have Brave Bird. This is a bait game and we're going straight for it. Let's see, is Brave Bird gonna land? Does our opponent respect the damage? They don't. Drifloon gets one shot and in comes a Pika Libre. And I will have to give up a shield right here since I do have access to Flying Press, which would absolutely eviscerate my Vigoroth. And here I do unfortunately end up playing to a CMP tie. Flying Press is 5 Thunder Shocks, then 4 Thunder Shocks, then 5, not straight 5. So I overfarmed a little bit too much, but that's good because my opponent gives up a shield there anyways, allowing us to counter all the way down and they concede the match. They must have been very weak in the back to the Vigoroth. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Pika Libre. This is a terrible lead for us, so we're going to safe swap right into our Vigoroth. And again, they do have access to Flying Press, which I will have to give up a shield and respect here myself. And if your opponent decides to stay in that matchup just because they have that Thunder Shock advantage, you could counter down in the 2s. And since my opponent recognizes that and they want to save that Pika Libre for my Ducklett, they do swap out into a Nidoran. But bad news for my opponent, Vigoroth. They allowed my Vigoroth to get such a big energy lead. So now I'm going to be able to force shields from my opponent, which I do as they land the Sludge Bomb, take out the Vig. But this just sets up my Ducklett for a farm down. I can tank whatever move they throw as long as it's, even if it's a Sludge Bomb, I should say. And I'll be able to leave with a Brave Bird loaded to throw out the Pika Libre. You might go, K-Pine, this is resisted. Why would you throw the Brave Bird? Well, there is no such thing as a resisted Brave Bird in the Little Cup. And my opponent knows that. They respect it with the shield. In comes a Litleo. And my Galarian Stunfisk is just going to be able to close out this matchup. As Rock Slide one-shots the Litleo. Back in comes the Pika Libre. And I will commit a shield here as I do have that Rock Slide stored. I can just throw it right away and take out the Pika Libre for a good game. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Vigoroth. Pretty good lead for us, and one thing to be mindful of in the Vigoroth Ducklett matchup is always let them throw first. If they overfarm with you, don't throw your Brave Bird right away because you don't want to debuff yourself and then have to give up a shield. So we're going to comfortably no shield that first Body Slam, and we're actually going for a Bubble Beam bait here because our opponent called the bait, they give up a shield, and that is fantastic for us because now we can give up a shield with them, overfarm till just before their next Body Slam, and then go for another Brave Bird to either guarantee switch or get their last shield. My opponent decides to let their Vigoroth go, not wanting to give up that last shield yet, and they bring in a Drifloon. And this is very fortunate for me that I was able to maintain switch advantage, because Drifloon absolutely walls my Vig. They're going to save swap into a Chikorita, and now we have our Vigoroth to absolutely just start spamming off these body slams. First one gets it low, and my opponent's going to throw an energy ball in return, which takes out my Vigoroth, but that's okay, as my G-Fisk can just close out the game from here. Rock Slide coming through. Opponent does decide to use their final shield, but all this is going to allow me to do is Mud Shot all the way down and leave with a Rock Slide for that Drifloon. They go for another energy ball, potentially hoping for that defense debuff, but back in comes the Drifloon, throw one more Mud Shot, and then our Rock Slide for good timing. This should just about be enough to take out the Drifloon, of which it is, and that's a good game. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Shelmet. This is a fantastic lead for the Ducklett. And what's even better is that my opponent is staying in, and they're going to be spamming off body slam. So this must mean that they're weak to Ducklett somewhere else in the back as well. And you see here, I'm not going to throw my Brave Bird yet. I still want them to throw off this body slam damage and not potentially debuff myself, so their next body slam would do more. So I'm going to load up till just about 100 energy, throw that Brave Bird to take out the Shelmet, and now see, I'm already at another Brave Bird as a Skrelp comes in. Potentially that was a very good baiting situation just in case, but I wanted to guarantee that shield in case they happened to let it go through and call my bait. And in the back they have a Fletchinder, which is a very cool pick. Don't see Fletchinder much often anymore in Little Cups. I know previously before I used to see it a bit, but nowadays not anymore. We are able to counter down that Fletchinder, leave with 1 HP, and get that body slam off to guarantee the final shield from the Skrelp, and my opponent concedes the match. GG's. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Ducklett. The Ducklett mirror. Now, my opponent in this one actually swaps out into a Cottonee, which is an interesting decision. And I'm going to stay in, go for this Brave Bird, and then counter swap with my Galarian Stunfisk, as I am resisting these charms. But normally in the Ducklett mirror, if your Ducklett is non-shadow and your opponent's Ducklett is non-shadow, if you throw that Brave Bird right away, you can actually survive a Brave Bird on very low HP. If one of them shadow, you won't. But like I said, if none are shadow, you can actually survive that Brave Bird. So it gives you a little bit more leniency to play around with whether you want a Bubble Beam bait or not, or just go for the nuke right off the bat. And back in comes my opponent's Ducklett, and this one's actually Water Gun. So it makes sense as to why they swapped out now. And this right here is only a Bubble Beam, but I am going to still shield it because my opponent has had 2 fast move heavy pressure Mons so far. So I'm expecting that there could be a third in the back, and I'm correct. It is in a Confusion Venonat. And now this matchup is going to be very close, as I will have to give up a shield right here to the Poison Fang. Opponent's just going for that fast move beat down here, which is kind of an effective strategy since most of the Mons in the Little Cup are fairly glassy. But because of that Poison Fang debuff, we're going to fall just short of our next body slam and get outpaced here on our Ducklett, of which this Bubble Beam plus a Water Gun afterwards will be enough to do it. GG's to my opponent, well played. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Shadow Alolan Grimer. And my opponent is staying in as they are running Bite. So you know what? We're going to debuff their attack as soon as we can, not even going to build up to that Brave Bird. And my opponent does actually surprisingly end up respecting it with a shield, probably because that Alolan Grimer is fairly glassy. So now they're going to save swap into a double, and I'm going for the Brave Bird. Not baiting here. They have already given up 1 shield, not expecting them to give up their second, as they don't, and double gets absolutely 1 shot. Now since we are debuffed, I'm going to swap back into my Vigoroth to reset that the defense drop. outpace to this body slam, and in comes their own Vig. So now I do have this matchup won, as what I can do is safely shield up this body slam, throw off this bubble beam to debuff them, and they're not going to be able to farm me down, so they can overfarm as much as they want, and which would be playing to the CMP tied to my next bubble beam, which they do. And now this next one will take out my Ducklett, but because they are debuffed, G-Fisk will be able to survive the counters and the Brick Break if they have it, and get to this Rock Slide to take out the Vig. So moves coming through. It is the Brick Break, but G-Fisk is able to hang on and take this one from my opponent. GG's to them, well played. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into the Pika Libre again. So same situation as last time. We are going to immediately save swap into our Vigoroth. And just like last time as well, my opponent is staying in to fire off this Flying Press. So I do give it my first shield. And now my opponent brings in a Ducklett. And they gave me, per usual, a big energy advantage. So the first body slam is going to land. And the second one is just about going to take it out. So my opponent will have to give up their shield back in this situation. And now here, a Bubble Beam's not going to do it. So they are going to have to debuff themselves with a Brave Bird if they want to take out my Vig, which they do. But now this sets up my own Ducklett for a farm down. So I'm going to wait out my timer, bring in my Ducklett. They will reach another Brave Bird, but since that Pika Libre is waiting for it on the other end, I can't give up my final shield here and just need to get off as much damage as I can. So I'm going to fire off this Bubble Beam right away and then swap into my G-Fisk, of which they have a Pelipper in the back. So now this is a tricky situation because Pelipper does have access to the super effective Weather Ball, but Pika Libre has access to that Flying Press, and Flying Press essentially one-shots a G-Fisk. So I'm going to take my chances with the Weather Ball, which ends up being the right call, as Weather Ball is just barely not able to take us out. So now we save our shield for this Flying Press, and we are going to be able to withstand these Thunder Shocks to Mud Shot the Pika Libre all the way down and take this one. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Wooper. Another good lead for us. And my opponent's going to swap into a Drifloon, and we have a great answer in our Galarian Stunfisk. So we're going to fire off this Rock Slide, see what my opponent wants to do, and they end up giving up a shield here. That's perfectly fine, because now that I have shield advantage and Ducklett, which has access to Brave Bird, I'm perfectly fine giving up switch advantage there. But since my opponent ended up going for the Icy Wind instead of the Shadow Ball, I decided, you know what? Why not shield their second one, get off that Rock Slide, and now you can reach a third one to guarantee their final shield or switchback. And it seems like my opponent is fine with farming down with their Wooper, but unfortunately for the Wooper, I have my Ducklett here, which is going to be double resisting those Mud Shots, and they're just going to have to spam off Body Slams. So first Body Slam does land, and I'm not going to throw my move right away. Again, I want to overfarm as much as possible before debuffing myself. So now I'm going to load up on energy, throw this Brave Bird right before they reach their next Body Slam, but my opponent makes a catch on a Drifloon, and Drifloon gets absolutely one shot. So now that's fantastic, because that keeps my Vigoroth from being up against the Drifloon. Now we can just spam off these Body Slams in return against the Wooper, and this game should be won. As I do play to the CMP tie there, get the final shield for my opponent, and now I can let this go. Ducklett can easily close out this matchup with a shield and access to that Brave Bird, and my opponent recognizes that, so they concede the match. GG's. Next battle, we lead Ducklett into Cottonee. Cottonee Lead is very interesting here. If it's charm, throw your Brave Bird after 7. If they stay in, throw your Brave Bird after 10 wing attacks for good timing. Allows you to overfarm as much as possible while not debuffing yourself. And here in this situation against a Swinub, that Icy Wind did a lot more than I expected it to. So what I would recommend next time, if you want to keep on a Swinub swap, safe swap, where you want to keep switch advantage, give up a shield and just, if it's a Shadow Swinub, you can farm it down all the way. If it's non-Shadow Swinub, you're going to have to throw a Body Slam before their second move. But in this case, I didn't give up a shield because they have a Cottonee in the lead, and both Ducklett and G-Fisk have a good matchup against Cottonee, so I don't need switch advantage there. But now in comes a G-Fisk from my opponent, and I will respect it as it is the Earthquake, so that was a fantastic shield on my part. And now they're going to swap back into that Cottonee that is now going to be greeted by this Rock Slide spam from the G-Fisk. First Rock Slide comes through, second one more Mud Shot for good timing, with the second Rock Slide now being able to land, bringing them just outside of the red. And here I'm going to let this move go. I'm trusting in that my Ducklett will be able to close out this matchup. And I actually don't throw that Rock Slide right there because I want to give my Ducklett more energy as opposed to giving their G-Fisk more energy to then outpace my Ducklett. But the unfortunate part is those charms, that last charm registering, cost me the game. If that last charm wasn't able to register, I would be able to outpace the G-Fisk, reach a Brave Bird before getting Mud Shot down, which would be enough to take it out from this health range. But because that last charm registered, my opponent is able to Mud Shot down and take that one. GG's to them. Next battle, Ducklett into Lanturn, an atrocious lead. So we are going to swap right away into our Vigoroth, and our opponent staying in, supposedly going for a little bit of Surf Chip and then swapping out as they don't have a great response to the Vigoroth. But I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to keep my Vigoroth very healthy so they are forced to stay in with their Lanturn. So with this counter damage, that Body Slam does get their first shield, and I'm feeling brave. Vigoroth should be able to hang on to that Surf, which it just barely does. We get off that last Body Slam and get their final shield, which is fantastic. Because now G-Fisk shields are down and has access to EQ. We're going to see what my opponent has in the back. So I do want to preserve some health on my G-Fisk a little bit. My opponent goes for a Rock Slide catch on their own G-Fisk, but little do they know I have access to Earthquake to absolutely ruin this G-Fisk's day. They are able to land their Muddy Water. A little bit of a misplay by me by not throwing before that, but that's alright, as that Earthquake one-shots their G-Fisk. See what their third Pokemon is that they're going to bring in? It's a Swinub. We outpace to this next Earthquake, which is going to one-shot that Swinub as well. Down goes Swinub. Bring back in that Lanturn. We go for a little cheeky Surf catch right here on our Ducklett to then wing attack down the Lanturn and close out the game. GG's to my opponent. Ducklett and G-Fisk form a fantastic core in the Little Jungle Cup, which I hope was evident throughout the video, and pairing it up with one of the best safe swaps in Vigoroth, kinda hard to go wrong. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate ya. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and with that, I'll catch you in the next one.